This is Brand to Brand Happy Hour, where marketing meets good company, great ideas, and even better drinks. All right, let's kick things off.
All right, back in the studio again. Today, I am sitting down with Julie Sullivan. Let's do a quick cheers.
Cheers.
Thank you so much for coming.
Thanks for having me.
Julie, you've got a really impressive background. I'm not going to say the years, but worked for LoJack, CVS, Blue Cross Blue Shield of Massachusetts, Breeze Line, and now you are focused at Bright Horizons for their EdAssist platform. So really helping companies make sense of continuing ed. We're talking about storytelling today, the power of storytelling, and I think storytelling is sometimes a buzzword. And we don't want to use a buzzword today. We want to focus about how storytelling in today's market really relates to authenticity. What are your thoughts here?
It's a scalable, innovative, no, just kidding. You said no buzzword. Yeah, so I totally agree. I think that everybody says storytelling is the most impactful. But then how do you get there, right? And, you talked about my background. And I like to think that I, as a marketer, have been industry agnostic, right? You go to a different industry, but you have the same marketing challenges. And I think in every industry that I've been in any company I've been at, storytelling has always been the holy grail. Because we know as marketers, but we know as human beings, that if you can get somebody like you, social proof, to tell you that something works, something makes sense, I recommend this, you know that somebody's more likely to respond and to resonate with it, right? So like for us at Bright Horizons and EdAssist, that could not be more true. And we know that, again, as marketers, but we know that through research. So we went out to our learners, which are employees of 250 organizations, from McDonald's to Bose to Apple to some really impressive brands. And we said to them, how do you know that you even have this benefit to upskill, to further your education? And for those that did know, those that heard about it was either from a manager or from a peer. So if you hear this from your employees and know that that is where they learn about their benefit, we know that we have to be there. And that's really our challenge and our opportunity at the same time. Get to employees to let them be the ones that share, the great news about the benefit with other employees.
You mentioned the data, and I think the data around continuing ed, there's some pretty sad insights there, but 7% you said earlier, is what people actually engage. That's the percentage of population that actually take advantage of continuing ed opportunities in organizations, right?
That's exactly right. And what we found, and it's actually quite fascinating, is we call it the leaky funnel, right? So we know, again, from research, that 80% of employees want to further their education and get, have their employees offer continuing ed, 80%. That's pretty big. Yet those that are aware that their employee actually offers it are half of that. It's 40%. And then out of the 40% that are even aware that their company has it, 25% actually begin to start an application, to start the process. And then out of that 25%, to your point, only 7% do it.
You said 7%, it actually scales up for certain industries. Certain industries in the medical profession, they need it. It's an important part of their career advancement.
Exactly.
But 80% of people that actually want it, what are you finding in terms of how you're using storytelling to help unlock that larger percentage?
Yeah. Well, I'll be honest with you. I think that I'll sit here and say, I know storytelling is going to be our unlock, but we haven't got there yet in terms of consistently using it. I will say that it's really interesting. I consider when we connect with employees, we call that B2B to E, because your employer is really a gatekeeper to get to the employees. And it makes sense. If you have hundreds of benefits, you need to get Comcast or McDonald's, insert the employer's name. You got to get their permission to talk to the employees, right? So I feel that we're still working client by client and talking to them about the value prop of like, why do you want your client to be, like, if you want to increase utilization, why do they care? Because it's going to increase your retention. It's going to improve employee sat. You're going to attract the best, the best employees if you offer this benefit. We got to get them on board on that. And then you got to get to the employee and get them willing to talk about it. Some of the ways we do use it today, even though I don't think we're at the tipping point of where we are like at this consistent usage, but some ways we've started is social media, right? We look at our social media accounts and say, how do we get the employees front and center there? McDonald's is a great example of leveraging their employees. I'm so impressed with how they're using it. Their branded education platform name is Archways to Education. And they just celebrated their 10th year anniversary of offering EdAssist or Archways to Education to their employees. And they brought an agency on board to really celebrate this. And really, to the credit of this agency and McDonald's, the hero and the headline is not about Archways to Education. It's really these employees that have used it in their stories. It's a great way of using storytelling to bring it to life for other employees to use.
Well, you were talking earlier, too, about your time at Blue Cross, and similarly that it very much boiled down to how you could leverage and use story from a campaign perspective.
Yes. So for Blue Cross, at the time that I was there, I'd say it was at least a 10-year run where we had the same, this is a very long time to have an ad campaign with
100%.
The same campaign, the same strategy. But at Blue Cross, the campaign was truly just videos of members, right, that were talking about, what Blue Cross meant to them. That is who's going to bring your brand to the finish line in terms of, sharing it with others and having others consider it.
There's a lot going on in the marketplace right now, and I think authenticity is a word we hear a lot. I guess like rewinding just a little bit, why do you think story matters more today than ever in the marketing landscape?
Yeah, I'd say it's two things, but I think it's a correlation of two things. I think it is Gen Z, right, and what they not expect but demand in terms of authenticity. I think they can smell bullshit from a mile away, right? They just do. So I think it's like the younger generation coupled with the power of influencers that like authenticity is paramount in telling a brand story.
I think definitely our audience is getting bombarded with marketing message all day long, and they're yearning for that authenticity to the point where on a platform like TikTok, let's say, TikTok has proliferated this like lo-fi, zero production, direct to camera content. People don't want to buy from a brand anymore. They want to buy from a person. And in a lot of ways, the influencer movement was a piece of that. And I am seeing and hearing more about how, yes, there was this era of gatekeepers and gatekeepers that were curators of things, curators of what was cool. And then we moved to influencers where you could just see it directly. And there's starting to be a little more of a role of those gatekeepers, those curators, but gone are the days. And if you look at, like, let's say how a major brand used to utilize social media where everything was super curated, perfect, high production, etc. And now you look at some social media accounts where you see brands that just, I don't know, maybe it makes it feel like they just threw it to the hands of the youngest person that worked there, and then they just started running it however they saw fit. And it's not exactly that's how it was done in form, but a message from someone that looks and feels like you, that's what marketing's always been about. It's like find the audience, tell the story that's going to resonate with that audience. And what's going to resonate to use, we'll talk about Gen Z for a second. They don't want to hear it from a boomer. They want to hear it from someone that looks and feels like them. A team member wants to hear it from another team member. They don't necessarily want to hear it from the senior leadership that's really excited about the benefit, as you highlighted, right? It just, you start to water it down.
So this is interesting. I saw a panel last night, and the chief creative officer for Mayor Wu was on the panel. And she said that, prior to today's day and age of, like, to your point, 1,000 messages bombarding you every day, it was like 8 seconds that somebody would give to give you attention to your ad, right? Now it's something like 1.2 seconds. And that makes sense. I mean, think about how frenetic your social feeds are and how very little time that you have, or that you're willing to give, I should say, to connect and engage with a brand. So if it went from 8 seconds to 1.2, think about the benefit of storytelling there, right? If you have a spokesperson for your brand, or if if a company is talking about their product or service, you got to make that connection and get in there before you go in for the ask. Versus if you have an influencer, or if you have an actual peer, somebody you say they work with me, they're like me, they don't have to do any of that work. You automatically trust them. So it takes so much less time for them to, for that point that they're making to resonate with you. That's like a very, as I connect the dots of what, Ellen was saying yesterday about that 1.2 seconds and being able to have that immediate credibility to be able to tell that story. That's another reason why it's so important to have somebody that is credible tell that story. You don't have to do any of that time of like, this is the company, this is what we do, this is what we offer, and now this is why you should care. You're already at the why you should care because you should care because it's someone like me.
Mindshare is shrinking.
Yes.
We have such a short amount of time to get to the point. They think of the elevator pitch. The elevator ride's over. Mm-hmm. It's like you don't even have time to get in the elevator. Exactly. It's a rocket ship. And in a lot of ways, how do we make sense for the brands that are still using stock photography and stock content? It's like that seems to me like it's the prevailing easy win and the mistake that people make time after time after time after time again. And forget influencer. It's like, oh, you go to a conference and you look over and the booth has the same photo that a booth has.
Are you standing on my soapbox right now? So I got to be honest with you. I have to come clean. Like as a marketer, I've been known to use stock photography when you can't afford to shoot.
Sometimes you have to.
Sometimes you have to. But my team also knows my absolute aversion to stock photography because it takes a credible message. Forget about storytelling, certainly from a customer, but even from a brand. It takes a credible message, and the stock photography, in my point of view, is immediately diminishes it, right? So what I have been known to say time and time again, and I say this often, is if you have really strong copy, I'll say forgo all the imagery. Like let your copy be the hero, because your stock photography is going to diminish the credibility of these really powerful words.
Words are so important,
yeah.
And if the visuals support that, great. And sometimes they don't. Sometimes you read the copy and you look at the visual. And we're marketers, so we spend a lot more time with it. But I think what I always find is people are underestimating the subconscious that's just hanging out back here the entire time and making all these micro judgments. You only have one opportunity to make a first impression. And how quickly do we make a first impression? We make it in seconds.
That's right.
And we don't really, there's no like little ticker in your head where you're watching and you're like, you don't get to see all those little micro decisions that you made as a part of that. You don't think about it. It's all in the subconscious back there. But all of the marketing messaging and advertising and everything that we do filters through that same thing. And these are all just like little, you could make a little checklist. You could be like, oh, yep, lost me at the stock photography. Messaging was kind of lame. But they're there. That it is all part of it. And again, I love what you said before where you said, if you just put the right subject in, you've cut all that stuff out.
Do you know what drives me nuts for a lot of marketers and brands? What you just said about this decision-making process of like, okay, this isn't authentic. The stock photography looks like any other insurance ad, whatever your industry is. What drives me nuts is that some marketers feel like, well, that is true when I talk to my consumers, but all of that goes out the window when I talk to my B2B audience. Why? Why is a B2B target audience any different than a B2C target audience? They have the exact same thought process, but we feel like, oh, no, we have to be much safer. We have to be much more, we have to throw in every marketing buzzword on the planet. We have to talk about scalable and ROI. And trust me, I get they're important. I'm not naive that there are absolute, kind of credibility checkpoints for your business that you have to check off as a B2B buyer. But to your point of like getting their attention, engaging them, putting you in the consideration set, that is the same checklist. And I bring this up not to go into a rabbit hole, but to talk about storytelling, right? So yes, it's important, as I talked about employees, to have their peers, but it's also equally important for your B2B audience to have a storyteller, another CHRO in the case of my company and who our B2B audience is, somebody like them that is experiencing similar challenges. So I encourage marketers that are listening to think about storytelling, not just for your end consumer, but for your B2B audience. It's just as critical.
I think for a lot of organizations too, and I think about mission-driven organizations, nonprofits, businesses all together, we're all looking to get that message out there that resonates with the audience and motivates the audience to act. And nothing is more powerful than someone that's been through that journey. And so that's why it's the customer or it's the team member. It's somebody that's tried it. It's them that's like hanging around the corner that's like, listen, it's worth it. All right. It's not as hard as you think. It's easier than you might think. And these were the steps. And this is why it was transformative for me.
Yeah.
It's like we're all just like a few steps behind in the journey and we're like, should I do this? Should I do this? Should I do this? And it's that little shortcut. And if somebody that represents the brand tells you, oh, it's so easy, oh, it's going to change your life, we live in a skeptical world.
Yeah.
I guess like one of the other things that I was curious about is, what do you think, and what are some of the channels and distributions where you feel like story works so well? Obviously, social's great, and it's super easy to distribute and get out there. But I'd love to just hear a little bit more about that.
So the way I'm trying to think about it now for us is to go outside of our tried and trusted channels. One of my mentors at Bright Horizons challenged me, and I have not yet come with a solution to this challenge, but she said, it is going to be so powerful for the employees, of which we know, to tell the story. So how are you going to operationalize that? Like, what does that look like? How do you get, do you look at, for example, some kind of incentive for them, right? Do you say, tell your friends, your coworkers about your great experience and maybe get X? So therefore, it comes out of your marketing channels as like that campaign or that content strategy I talked to you about a second ago, and it becomes more of this like organic viral way of starting a conversation internally. That is where I can't unsee. Like to me, I'm like, that's it. That's it. Like, how do we get people, like, there has to be a whim for them, right? They're not going, maybe some, I should say, there's some that really, truly changed their life. So they're talking about it to anybody who listens. That's great. But if we want to make it more of a scalable way of like really getting people to talk about it, what do we do to like encourage them or motivate them or incentivize them to do it? I don't know what that is yet. I'm thinking, my gut is like, do we do a little bit more research? And I don't say research as like an expensive, time-consuming thing, but get a little bit closer to employees that want to tell their story and figure out what is it that's going to help them do that, help them tell that story and encourage them to tell that story. We have the same challenge / opportunity with College Coach, which is another piece of business that we market. And, it's a really high NPS score for parents that use College Coach that love it. I mean, they've got their child into the top school. They found a phenomenal college coach that is a wonderful fit for their child, that is an athlete, that has learning disabilities, and they show them how to navigate this incredibly daunting, complex system to get them to their college of choice, right? That's such another great line of business where we can use storytelling from parents to tell other parents. And we just got some research back, and we just learned about it yesterday, about the importance of your friends and family, talking about what they have done to influence
influencers. 100%,
exactly. I mean, again, industry agnostic, line of business agnostic in Bright Horizons, it doesn't change. So I think as marketers, we're so focused on, yes, omni-channel, and we have own channels, and we have paid channels, but there's, if you can be a little bit more creative and a little bit more like get outside of the tried and trusted channels and get to that consumer and get them to tell their story, that is, again, where we're going to do a crazy unlock. How do we get there?
It's bi-directional, too, though. If you think about like what you're talking about with McDonald's, the success is you being able to tell that story, and the success is them being able to tell that story. And so, I mean, it's also you give what you get, right? So if you have someone like McDonald's that's showing up every day, and they're saying, we're going to brand this thing, and we're going to create some energy around it, we're going to bring our agency partner in, and we're going to sell this thing, too. Well, they're going to see higher utilization. You're going to see higher utilization.
Win-win.
You're going to see a better outcome. And that's a story you're going to tell for other McDonald's of the world about what the transformative benefits are.
I love that you just said that because, there obviously is a marketer, as I think about, how do we drive utilization? How do we get that 7% up we talked about before? You want to develop like effective strategies. That's a no-brainer, right? And storytelling, I do think, is the inroads to get to effective utilization. But to your point, at least in our business today, there is such a win-win there, right? It's like, yes, we get them to tell their story, and then we get others to utilize the benefit. But think about that benefit for the company. You are attracting talent, in a very competitive market by sharing that this is a benefit that you offer that other competitors don't. You are retaining talent. You are driving utilization. So you are upskilling for these hard-to-fill roles. There is such a win-win, and it seems like such a no-brainer to me, but yet it is not as easy as one would think to say, for a company to say, absolutely, have carte blanche, talk to our employees, encourage them to tell the story. It's just not that easy.
Well, you're highlighting
such a win-win.
You're highlighting some of the barriers. So I know there's a lot of red tape here. Sometimes people are like, and I hear about this too. You talk about case studies. Case studies, social proof, storytelling. It's all part of that same through line, right? And so there's a lot of challenges even to get to the place. There's how many layers of red tape just to get to the interview where you're actually hearing directly. And also not everybody is ready to be a part of that. Some people are natural born storytellers. Some people are connectors. Malcolm Gladwell, right? Like they're already ready. You put them in front of the camera, they're ready to tell a great story. I'd love to hear just a little bit about how you overcome some of those obstacles. Yeah,
we're doing it every day, right? My PR team is very lean and mean within Bright Horizons, and they're phenomenal. And because we do have those challenges with our clients of saying, can we use your name? I mean, the names that we work with are just wonderful, highly recognized, respectable brands. Of course you want to use their name alongside yours. And, when we have a roadblock with maybe our salesperson not being able to make that connection or whatever it may be, we're having our PR team going directly to the Corp Comms team. We're trying to, and we just did this, like Tiffany, Toyota, a couple of these brands. Our PR team is saying, let us go with this really compelling story directly inside versus maybe some of the channels we use today, because it gets stuck, right? And I get it. I get why it gets stuck, because there's other priorities people have. I don't judge or blame why it gets stuck. I'm just telling you as a fact it gets stuck. So what we're trying to do, and this is our GM, my boss, that had a really great idea that we're like, say no more, we're running with it. How do we go directly to the Corp Comms teams and give them that proposition that we just talked about? Like, understand that you're conservative about having your name in PR, understanding you're conservative about having your name in a case study, but think about what that can do for you as a brand. Think about how that can give you a competitive edge with talent attraction, talent attrition, talent retention, all the things that you really care about. And not talk about us. We never want to talk about us really in a case study, in PR. We want to talk about the brand and their wins. We could care less if our name is there. We can be an ingredient brand gladly because we power whatever we're talking about. We are the reason that the brand is experiencing, all of these great, outcomes of it. And that's our latest creative inroad, is like trying to find a different place to start within a large organization to get the yes.
I love that. And I think being an ingredient brand, even just highlighting on that or thinking about that, it gets it. If we're adding noise to the conversation, and that's being another place that's holding out, that's making it further from the what's in it for me, well, let's just help them get to what's in it for me faster.
Yes, exactly.
Moving past the red tape, what do you see in terms of storytelling in the world of AI? People are finding really innovative ways of using AI, and it is kind of changing the game. But that kind of in some ways moves us away from this authentic message. It's computer generated. It doesn't have the same feel. It doesn't have the same human to human qualities. So I'm curious what your thoughts are.
Yeah, it's a great question. And I don't think it's a straightforward answer. But where I immediately go is trusting a brand, right? Let's say that AI wasn't even a thing. What is stopping a company from saying, John Smith from this company says we are the best thing since sliced bread, and you got to buy 2 of us because we are that amazing? Why can't we say that and put that out there? We don't need permission from anybody. We are making something up, and it is a story that we're telling. That is not true. And that, ultimately, if that, that erodes the authenticity of a brand, right? So that's why we battle the good fight with red tape. And that's why we try to inspire to get those stories, because we want them to be authentic. I think AI is going to, for brands that don't have, the character that, a brand I feel like ours truly has, some brands I bet will absolutely, leverage AI to potentially tell stories that are not authentic, that are not true. That could happen. That will happen. That will absolutely be. But that could backfire on you and erode your brand like nothing else, right? So I would say, you gotta have the truth, the source of truth from a company, and truly get that amazing employee story, that customer story. And then for me, AI is only then, a propellant to get you to the next step. AI can help you figure out how do you take that nugget of a story and then bring it omni-channel. I think that could help you. AI used for, in a not so good way could be really dangerous. But you as a brand have to figure out how you're going to use AI with storytelling.
And I think there is a role in AI in production in the future. You can create really interesting pieces of content, but in terms of storytelling, where and with an audience that's really yearning for more authenticity, the role of AI might be behind the camera. It might be around helping frame the story, the talking points, the discussion guide for an interview. Like, there's all sorts of ways that you can utilize it, but you can't change the human to human connection that happens when you put someone on screen or you put a message out there that ties back to a kind of core truth. And that's just something that AI, at least in my brain, and definitely not in the near future, is going to be able to figure out. And that's okay, because I think that there's different ways that we can leverage this technology in some of these tools. Well, I mean, in terms of like some closing remarks and like some takeaways here, I guess the first one would be marketing is a space where there's a lot of words we use. There's a lot of nomenclature. There's a lot of buzzwords. What would be a buzzword that you'd like to retire, that you'd like to see gone?
I have one, and it's been bothering me for years. And you will never, ever, ever see it in anything that I create or my team creates.
Let it out in the world.
It's one-stop shop.
Oh.
I hate it. I don't know why. I don't know if I had this like triggering experience in another company, or if it just, I just hate it.
From a storytelling perspective, is there a storytelling truth you swear by, or any like secret sauce where you're like, if you're gonna do it, you gotta at least do this?
Yeah. So I feel like what makes a great story is the good, bad, and the ugly, right? You don't want the unicorn and rainbows storytelling, because as a brand, you got to be really careful of what they say, because then they're just a mouthpiece for you as a brand, right? Like, I feel like a really good story talks about the obstacles they may have had with your brand, talks about the realities of, you know what, it wasn't easy, but this is what I did and this is how I overcame it, or this is what I did and this is what worked for me. I feel like that speaks to the authenticity. So I feel like if you have the opportunity and the benefit to have a customer tell a story. Don't make it scripted. That just kills the essence of what you're doing. Be real. Allow them to tell their story and their words, not your words. Because again, hire an actor if that's the case. Use your stock photography if that's the case. Let them say what they're going to say, because at the end of the day, that's going to just be more believable and more authentic.
The subject on camera becomes paralyzed when you give them your talk track. And no matter how hard you try to jam it in, if you're going to try to control the message, then ask the probing questions.
Right.
Do a few takes. Get the person comfortable. You can help guide the conversation, but you can't force the conversation.
That's a good
point. And you
point.
can't give them prepared talking points, because if you do, it comes out on screen. They look like they're looking up over here. They're looking over here.
Right.
They're looking at.
Am I saying the right thing? Am I doing right by the brand?
They look at the interviewer after everything, and so you have trouble cutting the
Doing a
take
good
because their face is just moving the whole time.
I think you brought up a good point, which is ask the probing questions. So when we talk about relinquishing some of your storytelling and brand control to your customer, that doesn't mean you wipe your hands of it and say go at it, and then you do your next thing. It should be strategic of what you're doing. To your point about asking the probing questions, how do you get the most out of a customer? By getting the best out of them. But when you do that, don't be afraid and don't censor what they're going to say.
I love that. And there's a rawness. Mm-hmm. People like raw. They like real. People are yearning for that. And there's a real role for us marketers to step up and kind of fill that need.
And that is absolutely true. We talked about Gen Z and the demand for authenticity from Gen Z, but you give me any study or give me any research that tells me that any generation doesn't demand authenticity, and I'd like to see it. There is nobody from age 18 to 80 that's going to say, I prefer, a talking head telling me something that may or may not be true. No one's going to say that. Just like we talked about the B2B and B2C audience being the same, it's a universal truth for any demographic, any generation. Authenticity wins, and the challenge for marketers is how do we get that to come to life for our consumers, to sell more, to do more, to inspire more. But that is not a Gen Z thing that we have to solve. That is every consumer need that we have to solve, that we'll continue fighting the good fight. We'll find new innovative strategies to get us there. Like I said, I feel like we, as our team at Edisys, there's a lot of gas in us still to figure out new and exciting ways to do it, because I feel like we've barely touched and tapped the potential. So I wish I had some really, here's the silver bullet. Here is the playbook. I don't have it yet. I've never had it, but I know that I'm on this eternal quest to do more because I know it works.
The show Mad Men recently celebrated 10 years from the last
Love John Hamm.
episode. Oh my God.
Yes.
So good.
Yes.
So instrument. I mean, there's some things on the show that not everybody loves. I talk about the show sometimes. The agency people are like, "Oh God," but what about I know, but that's a portrayal of what life was like back then,
That's
right? And we've made strides. I think one of the things that I find that's interesting about that, every generation has their own understanding of skepticism and trust and a marketing message. And if we think back to those days and what worked. And you talk about just let the copy do its heavy lifting.
Yeah.
We have so many channels and so many ways that we have to figure out how to take it. And marketing and the landscape has never been more complicated, and it only gets more complicated. And your Gen Z audience just understands the landscape better than maybe your older audience because they've lived it in the fundamental DNA, right? The very early stages. Kids that were growing up with iPads. I mean, they're going to look at the world a little bit differently than somebody that had dial-up and then finally got so it's just that they have a different level of savvy in terms of sniffing out the authenticity.
That's right.
Every generation sniffs out authenticity. Some of them take a little longer to get there.
So well said. I totally agree with that.
Well, since you said it was well said, we should probably end before we're ahead.
And on a high note.
The last question I have for you is not any related to subject matter. I want to know, what is your favorite summer happy hour drink?
My favorite, my go-to would be a really clean, a really pure, spicy margarita.
Ooh, what kind? Like a Tenteo, maybe a spicy infused? Do you infuse it yourself?
Oh God, no.
Oh God,
I'm
no.
not that fancy.
Have you tried?
I haven't tried. I'm a
You
little
gotta
nervous.
be careful. You put it in,
I'm
and like
nervous.
it's all about taking. Sometimes you got to take the hot peppers out.
Exactly.
Like within a
exactly.
week.
I mean, of course, I trust myself to pour a glass of wine. I can't mess that up. I mean, how badly could I mess that up?
Well, Julie, so lovely having you on the show.
So fun
Thank
to
you
be
so
here.
much for being here. Great
Talk about this stuff
conversation.
all day. Yeah.
Well, thanks for stopping by for another episode of Brand to Brand Happy Hour. This has been fun. And with that, we're out, folks.
And that's a wrap on today's happy hour. Next round's on you.